All right, guys. So I've been getting into systems theory, complexity. Like I always like to read up on stuff in like bunches, right? Like I always like to read up on stuff thematically and to just, whatever sort of group of books I get, I like for them to have like a similar theme and topic to them. So recently I decided to do like systems in a sense, ecology, that sort of stuff. And one idea that I think is very relevant is Gregory Bateson's theory of schizophrenia. I think it's very interesting. And I think that that idea can be applied on a um, level in which we can sort of see problems in, everyday life, not just in the sense of how schizophrenia forms. So Bateson's theory on schizophrenia, and this is very similar to Lang, with how he views schizophrenia and all that. With like, it's more so just being brought up in a quote unquote normal family that's not really normal at all. But Bateson's idea of schizophrenia is that schizophrenia comes about when the person is in a double bind and they have to more so create a form of communication with themselves that is divorced from reality. Because when confronted with reality, you have that double bind where any direction that you take, any action that you make, won't get you the result that you necessarily want. So let's just say, let's just say like you're in the household and like your parents tell you, hey, you gotta show affection, and you decide not to show affection, right? That's a problem right there. However, let's just say you go back in time and you decide to make the exact same decision, and you show like you decide to like hug your parent or do whatever, and you don't get affection back or whatever. That's what a double bind really is. It's where whatever decision you make in either direction um doesn't get you the result that will benefit you in the long run. And in order to conceptualize why things are happening, you have to create a dialogue in a world in your head that can legitimize what's going on to the best of your ability. And that's where you get the schizophrenia from. Okay. And his theory, you know, when you really think about it, like a lot of populations that are that have high levels of schizophrenia. Like me as a black man, as a blacks, we have super high levels of schizophrenia. And our community has many double bind situations, in society, in the household, this, that, or the third. But, when we look at just general society, no matter what your gender or your race is, you have a schizophrenia in society that is created through double binds. I mean, like, think about it, right? The most common thing that you'll hear is, like, I could think of like one double bind, right? Like, um, put good energy into the universe, and good energy will come back to you. But the universe is unfair, right? That's a double bind. Um, Hard work pays off, right? But in order to reach to the top, it's who you know. That's another double bind. Those conflicting messages where, it's like, okay, which message is the right message? Where should I go? In order for me to, say that my society is rational and makes sense, I have to place myself in like a psychosis. I have to place myself in a world where, this these messages can coexist with one another, even though they really can't, in any normal or cohesive way. And when we look at the world right now, I think the world right now um, is in that double bind position where a lot of decisions that we make aren't really gonna make a lot of decisions that we make don't really make a whole lot of sense when we look at what culture tells us to do. I mean, we believe ourselves to be in a culture where, if you build up your assets and you build up your resources and you build up your talents, your competencies, then you'll be okay. However, with what's gone on recently and even what's gone on in the past decades, like '08, um, we know that we know that that's not the problem. Things that happen on a macro global level will affect you no matter how much effort and no matter how much um, tentative focus you've put on your self growth and like your the protection of your assets. They will be affected. So that's like another double bind, because on the front of action, it's a double bind because of course you can't, if you can't really do anything. If you do nothing, then your safety isn't secured. If you do something, then your safety isn't secured, also. So you have to create a situation in your head to where you say, hey, if I do this, then maybe, my safety will be secured. Or, my safety, it's not that, this is false or this is false. It's there's something else that I'm not paying attention to. Or, what I'm saying in front of my very eyes isn't real. And you sort of, you see that psychosis and like that, schizophrenic thinking that, you can just imagine with, with what I'm saying. That's what Gregory Bateson is talking about in his, Ecology of Mind book when it comes to like the theory of schizophrenia. And I mean, when you look at it, it's very, very relevant, right? And when I talked about, black people and, our population having high levels of schizophrenia and us having double binds, I mean, one double bind is like, for us, um, like for instance, you grow up and, your parents might say that, um, they love you, but they might abuse you or belittle you or whatever. Religiously, you grow up under a religion where you believe that the religious authority or the God that is in this religious structure is going to protect you. Yet we hear stories all the time about how kids, they go into these spaces, whether it be like a summer camp or a church or whatever, and um, they get harmed, sexually harmed, physically harmed. It's just a whole lot of mess that happens. All of these things are those double binds. Now, with those double binds, Bateson isn't entirely pessimistic about it. He does say that, in those situations, there can come about creativity. So there can come creative solutions to your problem. If you can't go one way or the other, you have to create your own way. But again, that's creating your own way. You have to start from a blank slate. And, that can be hard because, it's a blank slate. So you don't really have a lot of material um, to create the foundation other than the material that you bring out of yourself. And, on whatever level this may be, whether you're trying to come out of a double bind that you see in your own individual life, whether we're talking about these double binds that we're seeing in society and culture, it's gonna come about through self-confidence that the self-confidence that what we are seeing isn't normal, even though it is the norm. Just because something is the norm does not mean, just because something is the norm doesn't necessarily mean that it is the right way or should be the norm or isn't pathological in a sense. Excuse the car alarm. I don't know whose car alarm that is, but um so just Bateson and that idea of schizophrenia was very enlightening for me. I've already talked about society as also being schizoid. You know, we've talked about, and I think in the schizoid video, we've discussed how Greenberg labeled the ages where personality disorder behaviors are prevalent, right? So you had like the narcissistic CEO age, you had the crazy hippie borderline age of everybody having sex with each other. Now you have the schizoid, we don't know what's true, artificial intelligence is just making reality up, like just this schizoid, psychotic age currently, right? So we've already talked about, the fact that society is schizoid, but when I read that passage or essay, because I think it's an essay, but he just put it in the book. It made me realize just how farther just how farther mentally ill society is, right? Society is just messed up. Even like when you think about like the DSM, like a lot of things in the DSM, they are, a lot of the conditions and the disorders within the DSM are, when you really think about it, they're normal responses to the absurd reality of modern day life. Whether it be personality disorders, whether it be, whether it be like anxiety with just the thought of you never knowing when like the walls around you are going to crumble, just that anxiety, depression, the depression of, whatever you do doesn't really matter. It's just like, these are normal things because that's the way, life seems to be. But we have morals which double bind you, saying that believing this is wrong, yet, if you choose not to believe it and continue doing what you've always been doing, that's not going to work either. But, we're approaching 15 minutes, so I don't want to have y'all stay in this video for too long. It's been a while since I posted a video, so I just wanted to, put another idea on the channel for you guys to think about. It's your boy Jalen, signing out. Peace.